Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Operations and Monitoring here on the second day of November 2017. It's a bit of an auspicious day because this was the day 12 months ago that the official results for the council election were announced. So we've all been in place for 12 months. We had a little bit of a delay before we could be sworn in, but maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I have two apologies. I have three apologies now from Councillor Kent, Councillor Tapsell and Mr Stanton. Could I have a move that those apologies be received? Thank you, Councillor Okawa-Tate. Second, Councillor Tapsell. We now have a left to centre left government and there's no one seems to be on the left at the moment. Too many right wingers. All right, that's the agenda for the day. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in terms of items listed on the agenda? There appear to be none, thank you. And are there any urgent items not on the agenda that need urgent attention? Good. Okay, well, I'd like to welcome Richard Bird. Yes. Oh, Councillor... Oh, up the top. Councillor Bentley's here. Should be Councillor Kent. Good train spotting there, Councillor Bentley. Very good. Yes, well, this Chief Executive Officer will introduce our Performance Management Manager, and we'll get into it.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee members and Morena. Can I just contextualise this? You're about to see a presentation which is on a very operational matter. The matter is around how we make sure all of our staff are clear as to what's expected of them and the sort of feedback and support they get with respect to their performance over a 12-month period. Now, that is a very operational matter, and it is unusual for a governance body to receive a presentation on this level of detail. The reason why we're doing it is so that you get a small glimpse as to some of the development work that has actually been done in the organisation and the sort of direction the organisation's taking to ensure that everyone knows exactly what's expected of them, the sort of outcomes that they're expected to contribute to, and how that aligns through into the Vision 2030 work that you have actually established. So that's the purpose of the presentation today, and with that I'll hand over to Richard.
You're welcome, Richard, on behalf of the committee, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and thank you, Jeff, for setting that context. So the purpose of this is to be quite brief and give you just a brief and high-level overview of the processes that we are have in place and are further developing for, I guess, the alignment of individual staff efforts in the council. So hopefully this works. So I guess to create a context around it, just amplifying Jeff's words really, it is part of the council's work plan towards Rotorua Vision 2030. You'll see up here on this sort of two-page document that I'm sure you're all familiar with, there's a list of improvement projects. This is one of them. So it is simply put to, I guess, improve organisational performance management with the aim of making the organisation more effective and contributing to innovation. Oh, is it working? There we go. So it's not, having a framework isn't new. We currently have and have had for a couple of years now, a performance and development framework for staff, and broadly speaking it has four elements. The first one is the process of aligning departmental and team purpose and direction and what they're focusing on with the overall organisational priorities. The second one is making sure that that informs ongoing regular performance conversations between the manager and their direct team members. We aim aspirationally for those conversations to take place monthly, and then at the end of the year we have a more of a summative conversation between the manager and that employee, and that leads us to undertake across the organisation what we call talent and remuneration review. So there is a link between this process and remuneration, and I'll touch on that in a minute as well. So all of this framework and the guidance around it sits on our staff intranet, so it's accessible and available to people. What we've done, the change this year, is that we've introduced a human resource information system, or modules within a human resource information system that enhance this process, I suppose. Better enable it, give us more visibility over it. So what you're seeing here is the performance and development, a screenshot from the performance and development module of that human resource information system. And I just want to point out a number of features to this screenshot. So the first one is up here, that the position description. So a staff member and their manager can go in here and view their position description, check that it's current, and change it, modify it if it needs to be changed, and we've got sign-off processes for that. Before they even get into that, though, I should point out that loaded in here is a strategy presentation. So there's actually an audio-visual presentation from the Chief Executive that staff can click on and review and refresh their memory about this sort of stuff. You know, what is the organisation trying to achieve, big picture. Secondly, for their particular area of the organisation, there's some area objectives. Clarity that came out of our Capability 2030 work around what that part of the organisation's there to do, what are its deliverables, and so on. So that then creates a context for them to check that their position description is current and accurate, and then to set a plan. So we have sort of, I guess, 5 dimensions to the plan. The first 4 are really how we want people to think about performance. So the first one, contribution, is that's the tasks, the objectives and stuff they have related to their particular job, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The second one is we want to give people a clear understanding that part of their performance or their performance expectations is that they maintain and continue to build their capability for the future. The third one is connectivity or connection. So in the modern workplace, part of your performance is collaborating well with others within your team, across the organisation and outside the organisation, actively developing and maintaining those connections. The fourth one is we really want managers to be having conversations with their team members around their career expectations. You know, are their career expectations aligned with the job they're doing? What are their desire and expectations for the future? It's an important part of keeping people engaged and motivated in the workplace. And the last one is pulling that all together and into an individual personal development plan. So I don't want to go into too much detail about most of those, except that to talk about I'll drop down into contribution in a minute, but clearly the other tabs across here talk about, there's a tab to enable one-on-one conversations where everything can be recorded, notes can be uploaded and so on, and also for the end-of-year conversation. The system also gives us, as administrators in our function, sort of the HR function if you like, dashboard ability to track progress and so on. Just to drop down into the contribution stuff, every person is expected to develop a plan, and that plan is really the fundamental basis for these ongoing conversations. So, and the plan will be under those 5 headings I talked about. and this is just showing you a glimpse of the first one. It happens to be my plan. And each of those objectives, so you'll see the first one there is around health and safety. Each of those objectives drills down and expands out. There's more detail in each one, including the requirement that they link, a person links that objective to our list of strategic priorities. And within the system, we've linked our sort of strategic priorities, which really again reflect this Capability 2030 work, and they're grouped under the sort of the core strengths that the council identified through that Rotorua 2030 work. I mentioned that at the end of the cycle there's an annual talent and remuneration review. I just wanted to point out that the outcome of that does lead to decision making about people's changes in remuneration for the year. So there is a link between the remuneration and performance, and the way that works is that for every position, every job, it's evaluated, has a size, and it has a remuneration assigned to it, and that remuneration range assigned to it, and that range is benchmarked against market data. And every year we get a refresh of that market data, and that determines the range. And it's the assessment of performance that shapes the level of movement within that range. And I think that's, so that's the performance module, performance and development module, if you like. There are other modules in the system that I'm not going to talk in any detail about, and we are rolling these out. There is an e-recruitment module that we currently have rolled out and are using for all our recruitment. We're currently rolling out an onboarding module, so this is part of getting people to perform well, is to get them up to speed quickly and engaged not only with the organisation but also with their colleagues, and we can start that process before they even arrive here. And there's thirdly a learning and development module which will help us to enable, I suppose, greater rigour in the way we encourage people to continue to maintain their capability and their skills across the organisation. So, Mr. Chairman, that's sort of the brief, quick, high-level overview that I wanted to convey. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Richard. Just before we ask for questions, CEO would just like some closing remarks.
So what I think from my perspective, this is just a system at the end of the day, but in behind it is quite a philosophical change in what work means. So most, in older generations, people identified or defined their work by what they did, the tasks that they were to carry out. And old systems of measurements merely said, well, have you done what it is that you set out to do? So have you developed X widgets, or have you written 5 reports, or whatever the objectives were. What this system is about, and what modern workplaces are focusing on, is actually defining work not by what people do, but by the results or the outcomes they achieve. The challenge in doing this, of course, is that organisationally you have to be able to define outcomes not just at the top level but throughout the organisation. And so what the system does is actually take a step forward as to actually how we can do that, and how we can assure that we're getting alignment between what someone says, for example, in our building division, in terms of why are they there, what outcomes are they looking to try and achieve, and the alignment through to the Rotorua 2030 work. So that this system is actually quite a big step forward for the organisation. It will create a little bit of uncertainty for staff, because what we're no longer saying to people is that success is not defined by writing reports, or issuing consents. Success is defined as to the sort of outcomes this organisation is looking to achieve. So if you look down at our consents division at the moment, they will talk about the fact that their role is all about enabling people to achieve what it is that they're looking to achieve. You know, that's a restatement of their role. And this is how, through this system, that we are providing if you like, a systematised approach to ensure that we are not only doing this, but doing so in a way that is aligned throughout the organisation.
One question I have, Richard, on your fourth slide, if you go back, this one, would you like to make comments on who has access to this information, the confidentiality of it, and the security of the information? Because I think those things are important, and like I've got it in terms of you're looking for that collaboration approach. So if for example, Mr. Waru is in a similar situation, say at Infracore, is he able to access cross people information? I mean, that's what I need to know. I mean, it's is it just a one-on-one situation, or is it across the organisation situation?
So the system obviously is across the whole organisation, but there are very tightly controlled permissions within it. So an individual employee only has access to their own information. Their manager has access to their team's information, you know, the people that report to him or her, that's all. The one-up manager has access to the people within their span of control, and so on. And within the organisation development and capability, or HR function, of course, we have some administrative access to it all. So those permissions are locked down very tightly.
Just one other follow-up question. So when on the system here, on this grid you've got in front of us, if someone gets new roles and responsibilities added to what all they're already doing, how is that factored in relation to your third to last one, talking about the link to remuneration?
Right. So
is that obvious when you look at it, or?
I think the answer to that is the approach we've taken, and this system recognises that, you know, the old world view that once you set a set of accountabilities, they never changed, is gone. We live in a dynamic world where they're constantly changing. So we cope with that by having, firstly, the ability to review a position description at any point. It's there, it's live, we can review it, we can change it. And secondly, the plan itself becomes dynamic. So at any time during the year and monthly conversations or whatever, that plan can be changed, amended, adopted, and we expect that will happen, or it does happen. And then I guess the overall summative assessment of someone's value and performance to the organisation is based on a sort of an overview of all that evidence that's been built up over the year of the contribution and the value they've contributed to the organisation.
Councillor Gould?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your presentation today. Question for you, does this apply to the CCOs, or the staff working for the CCOs, and does it mean that the chief executive of the CCO has access for this information, or is it just coming back to you because some of the information is actually relevant just in that particular area?
The answer to that is within, basically, Infracore do not use the system. They're not using this system, and we don't have access to their data. At the moment, Rotorua Economic Development CCO is in the system. They're not actually haven't rolled out the performance. We haven't rolled out the performance module in their company yet. When we do, we would only have administrative rights to it. Only they would be able to view their information, and we wouldn't. And we wouldn't be able. None of the staff in our organisation would be able to view their organisation either.
So follow up. So Infracore, will they eventually come on board?
The system is available for them to use if they choose to use it. The bulk of their workforce doesn't really suit this approach. This is really an approach targeted to a salarised workforce, as opposed to a waged workforce, which is what they have.
Okay, I accept that, but they're at the forefront of service delivery, and I thought there may be some linkages that could be used.
They certainly have put in place a very robust performance management system that suits them. I don't know that enabling it with a platform like this, an IS platform like this, would add a lot of value.
Councillor Rakawa-Tate.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Richard. I do appreciate that this is an operational system that you're sharing with us this morning, but I appreciate the opportunity to comment on it. I think most of us know that in high-performing teams, you're self-managing, and this goes a long way to actually achieving that, so that is good. And it's best practice as well. But our CEO, Jeff, mentioned that it will be quite challenging for some of our staff, a new way of operating. But I'd also like to just say that it will be actually quite challenging for our managers as well. There's a high degree of trust involved, and also for managers now to understand that if people are going to be self-managing, then that requires managers to trust them and to take a somewhat of a hands-off approach to managing their staff. And I just wondered if that has actually been relayed to the managers, and I presume it has, and are they comfortable? Because it won't work if we get enthusiastic staff buying into it and we have managers who are struggling and not always peering over the shoulders of their workforce. So just a comment, and perhaps thank you.
Jeff will probably make a comment as well.
Councillor, your points are spot on. You'll recall back in our Capability 2030 work that we've actually just moved through, the managers for each of our divisions were charged with the outcomes of their divisions and the requirement to create a structure or a response that was actually going to fit those outcomes. So in other words, the last change process we went through was not a centrally led change process. It was structured centrally, but the ability and the direction was really set by the managers themselves. So this was the first stage of actually driving down a whole devolved decision-making modality in our organisation. It's essential that this actually goes a long way further, and at the leadership team level we're actually having ongoing discussions to make sure that decision making does not stop at that management level, that it's actually devolved further through into our staff at the front line. What you're seeing, for example, in the call centre, one of the things that they're tracking is the call resolution rate. Now that basically means that when a caller phones in, our call centre is managed, rather than have to pass it through to someone else, that they're able to resolve that at that stage by the first person they speak with. Now that resolution rate, if you track it over time, is just stepping up continually, and I think they're now sitting at around about the 70 or more % level, which is a large move from where it originally sat. Now you might think that that's not a connected example, but it is fundamentally the difference, where our call centre staff now are able to resolve issues on the spot because they're able to make decisions and provide information that in the past they weren't. And that's an example of devolved decision making actually fundamentally happening in the organisation.
I think Jeff's provided the answer. The only thing I would add to that is this system, of course, doesn't exist just on its own. Around it, we have a program of training and development for managers to equip them to behave exactly as you've described, really.
Capability module, and we'll come to a worship in a minute. In that capability module, is that where the need, or it is highlighted where training and development of the individual is also in the plan that the individual highlights.
Exactly. So any one individual, when they think about their performance plan, they list the key things they need to do. They will also be challenged, if you like, by the manager and by the system to be thinking, well, where do I need to grow some capability? Not just because I might have a weakness in the job I'm doing, but actually in the future I'm going to have to take more responsibility for this part of the job, or so, So how, and then that falls down into the development plan. Well, how do I develop that capability?
Yes, thank you for sharing this. Just two observations, really. I do recall that we used to have a complaints resolution process that came through the CE, and we were clearing them at an incredible backlog. I don't see those now, which shows me that this is working because it's self-managing and these complaints are being resolved. The other one is the note that I take, and those other councillors that are involved in community events. And I don't know if it comes in the connection or the values, but I've been, there was the Ekiden where a team entered to support Alzheimer's awareness of council staff, the Pink Ride on a Saturday when council staff took us out, guided us around, and I don't know if it's in their own time, but it's an incredible added value to their role. And the other one was the opening of Puketi Federal Park, where staff were actually cooking sausages. And it's that is quite different that I see now, that it must be part of the culture of the organisation. And how is that recognised and rewarded or congratulated?
You mentioned values and connection. So in that sort of connection dimension of our performance framework, the values are embedded. So and when it comes to our talent scenario assessments, we have a list of talent scenarios that that describe what ideal behaviour looks like, if you like, under each of those dimensions, and under the connection dimension, it describes exactly that sort of behaviour that you're talking about, connecting with our community, but as well as that, connecting with other parts of the organisation, breaking down silo work and so on. So that then becomes recognised and reflected through the performance management process, and ultimately through the remuneration changes that occur as a result.
You can see that the staff are going out of their way, and that's quite a new culture that is becoming obvious in the community. Yeah.
Can I just add one more
Yes,
comment?
Richard.
I guess the other answer to your question, Steve, is we have a values recognition program internally, which helps to build that culture, where staff are informally recognised, I suppose, for demonstrating the values, if you're behaving in ways that reflect the values and model them.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'll just get the CEO to sum up, and it's been, whilst it is an operational area, it just shows you that councillors are, sorry? Oh, Dave. Dave's got a question before Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Richard, I thank you for the presentation. I like what we see, and I support measurement, moving from what you do to the outcomes or the why. That leads to the question of remuneration, and for an organisation spending public money, that's always transparency around remuneration is one that comes up, and you see it every now and again, how many staff we have within the 100 to 200k and other ranges. So while understanding that individual remuneration is a private matter, obviously at the end of the day, when you've assessed performance, there's a movement in a remuneration band. Is there a better way of when official information requests come from the likes of the Taxpayers Union, to say we have these salary bands and these are the bands that people are appointed in. And my other question is, with a new staff member, so people can move up and down in a band on performance, how do you set their remuneration, their starting remuneration in a band? Is it on their qualifications, or is where's the starting band? Do they come in at the bottom of a salary band? Can you answer? Give me some enlightenment there, please.
Certainly. So, in terms of the first part of your question, I mean, the information we provide is usually shaped by the request, often a Lagoima request. But where possible, our preference would be to provide sort of general information about the remuneration framework and the salary bands. The second question is, where does someone start, if you like? It's in appointing someone new to a role, we always undertake an assessment of how competent we think they would be in the role, I guess. And this is starting to get a little bit technical, but there's a sort of a bottom, a midpoint, and a top of the range. And the midpoint of the range really reflects the amount of money we would expect to pay for someone who is 100% competent in the role. And above that point, we tend to pay for someone who's a high performer in the role, so competence plus, if you like. From the low point to the midpoint is really developing in the role. So typically when we employ a new staff person, we appoint them somewhere in that developing range, if you like. And where that is dependent on, obviously, the skills and competence in our assessment they bring to the role, and also the strength of their negotiation skills.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, but I think we're delving down into quite a bit of detail. Finally, Mr. Wadu, I need to wrap this up. We've been on this half an hour. Mr. Wadu?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. O tira morena tātou, Jeff, Richard, morena nora, kia kōrua. Paku pātai noho tāku. That's in terms of the, looking at the, I think it's contribution. I've been involved in a few organisations with a similar setup. And there's one thing that's always challenging, and that's the, I think it's, you might have it in the contribution column. And that's some people's ability to contribute are affected by other people's contributions. And so there's this trickle-down type effect. So I'm just wondering, what are the systems in place, or are there any systems in place to sort of counteract that, I suppose?
I think the answer to that, Mr. Chairman, is that's the point of the connection button. So it's formally recognising that especially in a sort of a modern matrixed, if you like, flat organisation, that the value or contribution we make to the organisation is not just what we do ourselves, but it's dependent on the collaboration and connection with others. So we reward people for actively supporting and connecting others.
Thank you for
Finally now, Mr. Williams, and we need to move on.
So look, I want to change the topic, and this is by way, if you like, of but watch this space. And what I want to add to this is that the concept, and I think it was Councillor Okawa-Tate, raised the question of trust. This is us about developing trust in our staff. But we need to keep on stepping this forward, and we need to look at not just setting direction, clear direction for our staff, but physically how they work and where they work. This has got to be a topic that we really need to look at. Our workplace at the moment is really one that probably goes back into the Industrial Revolution, where you effectively had an overseer who was in front of a team, clocked their team in, clocked them out, and actually ensured that they were given the right direction throughout the day. It was also built in, if you recognise, the time when offices were in vogue. You normally started work and your work life in the small desk in the corner, and as you graduated, you became to the front of the queue, and then if you were very lucky, you got your own cubicle in an office. So that's the old workplace, and if you looked at Glenholme Primary's advertisement the other day in the newspaper, our children are going through a complete reform in education. The whole activity learning approach is in vogue. So our kids are a different group of people. They expect workplaces and learning environments to be completely dissimilar from what traditionally has been the case. So what we'll be bringing to you in the next little while is some discussion about the form of our office environment. You'll know that we're going through a lot of change at the moment, and we're having a discussion actually in the executive team as to how we actually model this. So when you walk through our executive area, come and have a little look around and see if you can see some changes happening, because those will be the changes that you'll be seeing happening in the organisation as well.
Thank you, Richard. There is keen interest. Do you want to say something else?
I just want to draw your attention to one little thing. We haven't got time now, but it had been my intention to show a little video about the philosophy behind this approach. I encourage you to, I think that's available to you in your tablets. Encourage councillors to view that 2 or 3 minute
Well, if it
video
isn't,
clip.
we'll put it on Stella and get that organised. But thank you very much for your presentation, very informative. I'd like now members to turn to page 7, and I'd like a mover and a seconder for the motion that the minutes of the Operation Monitoring Committee held on the 5th of October be confirmed as a true and correct record. Councillor Gould, the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Any matters arising from those minutes that any member wishes to raise? Okay. If not, we'll move on to page 13, which is the council-controlled organisation performance for the 4th quarter with Mr. Thomas Colley. But we have a presentation titled T-Rex Limited Partnership for the 4th quarter. And are we getting a handout on this? Presentation first, and we'll get the handout will be on Stella, no doubt. Okay. Welcome, gentlemen. Selves and go for it.
Kia ora tātou. Yes, so I'm Dr. Russell Burton. I have the privilege of being the chair of T-Rex 2013 Limited, which is the general partner of the T-Rex Limited Partnership. My colleague here, Brian Vass, is the Chief Executive Officer for that company. I had actually understood that this was part of your board pack, but if that's not the case, then we probably will need to talk through it a little bit more extensively. Just very briefly though, we appreciate this is a catch-up meeting, so you will be seeing us again very soon with the other CCOs. We have had a couple of operational, major sort of governance changes actually in terms of the partnership over this last period of time. Don Atkinson, who was one of your nominees to the board, and also the chairman, has resigned. The board have elected myself into the role of chairman, and subsequently you have appointed Stavros Michael onto the board of the general partner. And I think that's a very good move in terms of strengthens the connectivity between the boards and yourselves as one of the 2 major investors. So with that general background, I'll hand over to my colleague, Brian Vass.
Thank you very much, Councillors, Mayor and Chairman. Thanks for inviting us today to give you a 4th quarter update on progress as far as T-Rex Limited Partnership is concerned. I'm just quickly going to remind people what T-Rex is about. Give a quick progress update against the KPIs that were set in the Statement of Intent for last year, look at some of the budget and how we performed, quick update on progress in terms of our capital raising and building a demonstration plant. I'm aware that most people know about T-Rex. Basically what we do is process sludge. Currently in Rotorua, sludge is trucked to out-of-district vermicomposting operation. There's about 1 truck a day that goes to that operation. So we remove the cost and the trucking of that, process the sludge on site, and we, out of that process, we get some recovered products that are used in the wastewater treatment plant. The value of those products in Rotorua, for example, is around about $500,000 in reduced chemical costs in the wastewater treatment plant. We are a council-controlled organisation, but we are also 50% owned by Scion, so we're slightly different from the other council-controlled organisations. Limited partners have really asked us to grow equity value and to remove and reduce ongoing investment by finding a new investor and to create an option for value in the future, and that's really the main things we've been focusing on. I'll go into a little bit more detail about this, but we have identified some potential investors, and we have identified 4 parties that we're in discussions around building a demonstration plant. And execution of these will provide an exit opportunity for the limited partners in 3 to 4 times the value of the investment to date in 3 to 4 years' time. One of our KPIs is the company operating efficiently, so we have minimised costs for this financial year as much as possible, and I'll go into some of the budget details in a minute. We've completed the audit for last year's finances with no material issues being raised. We issued our new statement of intent to partners in March, which was accepted by the limited partners. And we've reduced our budget requirements over the next 3 years. And we're anticipating our first revenues in 2020. If we look at the budget performance for last year, our budget was around 800,000 New Zealand dollars. We ended up with a loss of around 578, so we had a favourable variance to budget of around $255,000. That was really to do with cost savings as much as possible. In terms of maximising partners' value and minimising ongoing investment, which is another one of our KPIs, I think the key thing is that we have identified an external foundation who are prepared to fund the build of a demonstration plant in India. We are currently doing the design work for that plant, and that has been funded by that external foundation to the value of $100,000. So that's a good progress on getting external investment into the business. The next stage, once we've looked at bringing down the cost, will be to build a demonstration plant, and that external foundation have indicated that subject to a successful business case, they will fully fund that demonstration plant in India. We've also been talking to an Australian utility, similar organisation to somebody like Watercare in Auckland, who are keen to also build a demonstration plant and also keen to take an investment in the business. So we're in detailed discussions with that entity at the moment. And we'll also continue to look for potential investors in our other key markets in the USA and China. One of our key performance indicators was completion of the plant build. We did finish the design of the plant in the last quarter. That was a big undertaking. Included a lot of time spent on hazard and operation studies, and now we have a full set of design drawings ready for a plant to be built, which will be useful both not only in Rotorua but also for other plants. Unfortunately, the build of the plant was deferred due to Rotorua Lakes Council decision to go out to a build fund operate tender for the whole wastewater treatment plant processes, of which sludge treatment is part of. But we have been making good progress on some other options, which I've just referred to in terms of building a demonstration plant. In terms of our sales, 20 domestic customers have been qualified, and we're talking to 2 in terms of ongoing discussions around building plants. Those are unlikely to be built until 2020, so the overseas opportunities are more immediate. I've recently been in China, where we've been negotiating cooperation agreement with the province of Guangzhou, and also with a couple of large utilities there to build a demonstration plant in China. That was supported by the Deputy Council of China from New Zealand, and also the Trade Commissioner, so we got good support from the government in those discussions. As I mentioned, we've also been negotiating with the foundation for the plant in India and the plant in Australia. One of our KPIs was around the environmental benefit of T-Rex, and so we did complete an audit which shows that T-Rex is in terms of saving CO2 and other greenhouse gases, is very favourable to landfilling or other alternatives that are available in New Zealand. I think that's particularly relevant at the moment, particularly with the change of government, with a focus around meeting our requirements under the Paris protocols on greenhouse gases. We realised that the key step in value realisation is really around building the plant, and the decision not to go ahead with RLC has obviously impacted our value in terms of the need to find an alternative, but I think we are making good progress on that, and we anticipate the first step is to build a demonstration plant, and then we can start building plants for revenue, and we anticipate that to be in 2020. We've had good feedback that the company will be highly investable once we've got a demonstration plant built and we've got a commercial customer signed up, and that's really the time that existing shareholders should start getting some value out of their investment. So in summary, that's what our timeline and investment looks like. As I said, we're working right now on the value engineering for the plant in India. We're in good discussions for a plant in Australia. We've also responded to RFIs and having good discussions with 3 entities in America, one in the Bay Area, one in Portland, and one in Vancouver. All of that should lead to a first sale in 2020, and therefore revenue and value to the existing limited partners. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Brian and Russell. We appreciate you coming in. Your Worship, you have some questions?
Yes, that's good news, actually. It's fantastic, and sort of fits a futures focus too, globally and nationally. Just a couple of questions. The environmental audit, who undertook that, and that's great to know. And we also, the last time you came, Brian, I think we were also concerned a bit about the discoloration of the discharge. And I wondered if that problem has been overcome, and also the tender aspect intrigues me, and that's our business, and it's good to hear Stavros is now on the board. But if we're looking at a build, fund and operate, this is a complete new modality, and I can't imagine an organisation or a provider that would get their heads around this. And it's probably a question for Stavros more, that aspect, because it's such a new technology.
Thank you. If I deal with the environmental audit question first, Scion actually did the work for that. The scientists at Scion, who have a good understanding of doing these kind of audits, particularly one of the staff members, John Andrews, has been highly involved in doing similar type audits for other businesses. We just wanted to quantify that, particularly compared to landfilling, for example, which is the most common alternative for sludge disposal. And that creates a lot of landfill gases, which ultimately have a cost through the emissions trading scheme and through the levy. Councillor Rokawa takes. Yes, Your Worship, sorry. in terms of the build, own, operate contract, so look, we're aware that that process is happening. I think the shortlisted tenderers are actually due to be announced next month, and we will be talking to those shortlisted tenderers in terms of what they want to do with sludge disposal. But I guess from my perspective, if that does go ahead, then the decision probably lies within those organisations rather than the council. But I think Stavros will certainly have a view on that.
Ross.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Gosh, I have to wear two hats. I've got a hat as a executive member of Rotorua Lakes Council, perspective, and of course as a director of the company. And I'll start from the point of view of the director of, of the company. And obviously our primary consideration is to ensure that the company has a viable future by ensuring that any potential investors, are secure. So we don't have the shareholders continue to put money into a project that cost about $12 million to the public, for the last few years, and potentially could cost another $12 million. So it's important to make sure that we've got a viable proposition ahead of us, and that's what Brian explained. From the council's perspective, obviously you are embarking into a consideration of our new wastewater treatment plant that has got a number of objectives, including meeting very tight resource consent, considerations that will meet, effluent, specifications for discharge into the lake. At the early stages of the TEREX conversation, it was identified that the TEREX return, leakage back into the plant could possibly contribute additional nutrient, nitrogen into the effluent, and therefore making our target to meet, very tight, nutrient discharges even more tighter. So as part and parcel of our procurement process at the moment, we are asking the suppliers, and I'll talk later in my report, to identify potential options for meeting those tight, discharge specifications, and therefore that's what we are at the moment. TEREX may become, a proposition from them or some other system. But we will leave it down to the industry to define and explain to us how well and how confident we will be to secure the discharge consents we have, or we will have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that being a continuing issue. I think the only continuing issue we had for Rotorua was the one around nitrogen that Stavros referred to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation this morning. I find it really interesting, and it really does show that here in New Zealand we can punch above our weight in developing something that is likely to be wanted around the world. So I'm really delighted with that, because some of us will know here that this came in for quite some opposition from councillors in early stages. But I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if I should be asking these gentlemen, or perhaps Stavros, or our CEO, the mayor possibly, anyone. It's really about the our long-term interest in this business, because I've heard you say, Brian, that within 2 or 3 years, partners might be exiting, and I presume that is the council. I'd like to think, we're in here for the long haul. I want to think that this is going to make us millions at some stage, and I hope that we'll be, so I just would like to think, what's our long-term interest in this business? Can someone answer that, please, for me?
Good question.
If I can, through the chair, I think as we bring back to you progress reports, the assessment that we will be making is the likely ongoing nature of any type of return. So at the end of this year, 2018, we do need to be looking at the joint venture with Australia, and is that occurring? Has it occurred? Is the is the outcomes, or are the outcomes that we're seeing from this what we expect, given the investment that has actually been made to date. So that will be a checkpoint, and the ongoing involvement in the project will obviously be made based on that information. That type of process will need to continue throughout this time frame. So any ongoing involvement and the opportunity to withdraw will need to be made available, or made on the information available on the expected return of exiting, as opposed to the ongoing potential for return in the future.
Councillor Kumar, and then Trevor. Sorry, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Brian and Russell. A very encouraging update on T-Rex. The question I had is, I didn't pick it up, maybe you've already told us, but it said something about there are conditions laid down subject to their having the demonstration plant built. But tell me, is it to be built in Rotorua, New Zealand, or are we talking about being built in India?
Offshore. Offshore.
At this moment, the most immediate prospect is the opportunity in India, because we have got external funding for the first stage of that project. As the opportunity in Rotorua really does depend on the current tender process, who wins that, and what their view of sludge disposal is. So it's hard to answer the question around Rotorua at the moment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Brian, the environment is ripe for this type of technology, literally, and I think the information last week is that world CO2 emission levels are at their highest point ever, and so the planet is in trouble. So it's good stuff. So my question is, how secure is the IP around this? If we're exploring with companies or countries who are in dire need of this type of technology, you know, what security have we got in place that it's just not grabbed by someone else and developed?
Thank you for that question. Firstly, we do have our patent that's been granted in New Zealand for around 3 years. The patent was also granted in Australia earlier this year as well, so we have patents granted in those two markets. We're currently undergoing examination in our other key markets, which are the USA, China. That is quite a process, and our patent is quite a complex patent, so there is quite a long-winded process to go through to get those patents approved. But currently we are covered by our international patent, which gives us 3 years to get those patents approved.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you so much for your presentation. Dare I say, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I'm just wanting to know what's the worst case scenario. The fact that it is patented sort of covers that nobody else is rushing to do that, but what is the worst case scenario?
In terms of patents or someone copying our technology?
In terms of all the investments by the ratepayers in...
I guess the worst case scenario is that if we can't make further sales, then you will be constrained by your investment to date. You have the opportunity to turn off investment at any time. There's no, to my knowledge, there's no further consequences over and above your commitment to invest currently.
Just explain, Your Worship.
Just a supplementary, really. Would you like to outline, or Brian, the Ministry for the Environment contribution to this was many years ago. It was before I was even on council. So it was seen as such an innovative potential technology that we got a grant from the Ministry for the Environment to kickstart this, and council matched some investment. We're not rushing in here. This has been years and years, but to realise the potential, it shows how long it takes for that pre-investment window to actually be realised, and we're still not there. But we're hearing the most hopeful that I've heard yet. So that's very good.
And just complementary to what Her Worship said, to see that the Indias, the USA, the Chinas recognise there is a need, or they've got interest in what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, the upshot, the worst case scenario is we go back to dumping sludge at the landfill, and that was disgusting. But we've come a long way. We've been doing this for 8 years, I think, Your Worship, of coming through. I mean, to get TREX established and get Scion on board, huge commitment from the scientific community, buy-in from government, and local government. Other local governments are watching us to see where we're heading with this. So this is innovative, and we've got the patents in place because we were worried about the intellectual property being skived off by some commercial interest, so I'm pleased to hear that. Councillor Hunt, you finally, and then we'll...
Yeah, just a comment first, then a question. I too am quite interested in the long-term return on investment and hope that when the time comes that we will keep a foot in the door there, depending on what the outcome is. And I'm not surprised that Portland, Vancouver and the Bay Area in the States have picked up. They're the ones that are innovative. They're doing all the environmental work in those areas, and they're certainly the leaders. My question is, the demo plant in India, what sort of population would that cover, and is that is it scalable, or does the plant cater for a certain population and then you need more plants if you have a much larger population?
I'm unable to talk in too much detail around that because we're covered by a non-disclosure agreement with the particular foundation. But what I would say is that under the terms, it's actually for a population very similar to Rotorua. So what that means is we can pretty much pick up our design for Rotorua and build that plant in India.
So, okay, which allows it to go in a variety of sized areas. Okay.
Look, the other point I would make, that even in China, what we find is that there are a lot of wastewater treatment plants servicing big populations, but they're still actually quite small plants. So there's many plants servicing a big population more commonly than one very large plant servicing a bigger population.
Thank you, Richard and Russell, for your presentation this morning. You can see by the level of questions there's considerable interest in TREX, and we wish you well in your endeavours over the next 12 months, 6 months. Can I have a mover that the presentation titled TREX Limited Partnership Fourth Quarter 2013 Update be received? Councillor, Mr. Waru and Her Worship the Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll now move to page 14, and that could I have a mover that the report financial performance for the 3 months ended 30th of September 2017 be received. This is the dashboard included. Councillor Gould, Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Mr. Calais, welcome. Page 14.
Good morning, Chair. Councillors and board members. I do have a little presentation, I understand. Look, I'll take the report as read. I think that the pleasing thing for the year to date is that revenues have continued to track ahead of budget, and particularly off the back of strong revenues in the consenting area. So those trends from last year have continued into this financial year. Unfortunately, we have been impacted by higher utility charges around electricity pricing. In particular, that was in July and August. Those prices have now stabilised, so we did incur an additional $300,000 of operating expense as a result of that. It was particularly unusual for us compared to previous years because at that time of year, electricity is sent from the South Island to the North Island. And while we were fairly wet, the catchment of those hydro lakes weren't, and so therefore the electricity price for the spot did increase substantially. With winter obviously having passed and that electricity not as much being sent across the Cook Strait, those prices have now stabilised back to where we expect them to be. And the other one is just the timing of some maintenance as well. So we have done a little bit of substantial work around painting some of our pensioner flats, so it's just the timing of some of that expenditure that has pushed us over budget temporarily for this time of year. And the other one at risk is just the refuse collection, and the expenditure there is a little bit higher than anticipated, and it seems to be the cost of disposing to the landfill, and we're just doing a little bit of piece of work to understand that, and we'll report back to you at the next O&M or more thoroughly on the implications of that going forward, if there are any. So with that, I'll just briefly go into the dashboard. So the KPIs, so we're just in the process of doing our quarterly ones at the moment, so that is just probably a reflection of last year's ones, which we talked about at the annual report. From an operating perspective, so revenues are up, expenditure is over as with regards to what I talked to you about, but the two combine to be effectively on budget. So a small $90,000 deficit for the year, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, that's fairly on track. Capital expenditure is progressing well. With the Children's Library Health Hub and the eyesight and some of those other significant projects, the spend is progressing well. A little bit of pressure coming on board. When we set the budget for this year, we anticipated the eyesight to have been completed in the last financial year. Unfortunately, there were some delays late in the piece with regards to asbestos was found and had to be removed, so that project was delayed 2 months as a result. And so we are having some of that expenditure which was budgeted last year now falling into this financial year. So we're in the process, we're just looking at ways of looking to mitigate that. And overall, council debt at the moment has climbed a little bit based on the end of the financial year, but that is just due to timing with regards to when the rates instalments are due and around the level of spend, and so it is to be expected at the moment. And just remember as well that for the annual plan this year, we are budgeting to borrow $8 million, mainly as a result of obviously the building of the Rotorua sewage scheme. So. With regards to some of the other measures, so from a health and safety perspective, August was probably a little bit of a blip with regards to the number of reported non-lost time injuries. And as you can see, I know this is a confusing graph. I think the key one is the black line has reduced, and the black line is particularly the one where where staff are injured and are able to work. And so that has reduced significantly on where we were previously, and that was a result, and that increase was a reflection of the incident that occurred at the Pound over 12 months ago, because it, as I said, is a rolling 12-month average. Sorry. Already talked about operating revenue, already talked about operating expenditure, and sorry, capital expenditure as well. So from an FTE perspective, so those that are interested, below where we anticipate to be, so we are carrying a number of vacancies at the moment, and obviously that's just that continual improvement. And recruitment. From a yearly employee turnover, so we just remain consistent from where we've been previously. As before, we have separated out some of those higher turnover areas away from the rest of council, such as the Aquatic Centre and the museum, which can employ casual labour, particularly over summer periods for increased demands and so forth, and normally therefore do have a much higher turnover than the rest of the organisation. Unplanned leave, so that's a reflection of sick and so forth, and so the trends there are pretty similar with similar time last year, so no real abnormalities in that area. And the only one that is causing us a little bit of concern at the moment is the number of leave balances over 30 days. And so it has crept up over the last year from where we were, so we did have a targeted approach to reduce that, and it has crept, so we're just moving actively to work on that. And the reason why we monitor that is obviously we do want our staff to take their leave and not to just accrue it. So it's a health and safety, it's a well-being issue, and it's also from a risk management point of view as well as staff taking leave, other staff completing their jobs and having a different set of eyes over these sorts of areas. So with that, any questions?
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm not sure if this is your field of expertise or not, but I understand from a member of the public there's been a bit of a hiccup with the health hub. Can you enlighten us on that?
Probably JP, I'm not too
Or
sure on
Gaston
what the hiccup is. Yeah.
will cover that in his operational report. Thank you, Thomas. Any other questions, Mr. Waru?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Thomas. You mentioned here on page 15 the electricity increase and all that kind of stuff. So how will the savings be achieved that will offset the increase in electricity and waste disposal costs? Do you have a plan for that? In more detail?
In more detail, so it's up to the individual group managers to obviously manage that expenditure. So it can be managed because obviously those cost pressures came about early in the financial year. So each of the managers obviously can review their programs with regards to looking at savings as to how to offset that. Yeah.
Thank you.
One question I have, Thomas, in terms of refuse. I understand, I mean, if council's incurring costs that are causing drama, we are certainly getting the message from our community that the costs of taking stuff to landfill is just beyond many of them, and that's why we're getting an increase in fly dumping, but we'll bring that up with Stavros later on. Metapika Lokawa.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thomas, it's around the leave balances, and this seems to be ongoing. It's been brought up every year that we have these outstanding leave balances, and I know that we're trying to, encourage our staff to take leave, obviously for obvious reasons. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought someone had mentioned that managers were the main culprits or the main contributors to the leave balance, and I'm not sure if this is the case. So I'm just saying, if that's if they may well love their jobs, but their health and wellness is just as important as all the rest of our staff. So I don't know if that's the case, but if it is, maybe they need to think about ensuring that, because I know it's come up for about usually the last 3 or 4 years. And they were contributors to this. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, I will say, tongue-in-cheek, one of the worst culprits is JP at the back there. Look, it is across the board. I can give you an example of, say, a building consent inspector who's worked for us for over a decade, and obviously with the current pressures on with regards to the workloads and the difficulty of getting recruiting more building inspectors, obviously there's pressure on that individual to not take leave. Now that's pressure from themselves, obviously not from us. So it is just actively working through that. So there's a whole range of different reasons as to why that comes about. But from an organisational perspective, obviously we're very keen that they are taking that leave for all those well-being reasons and actively encouraging it at the moment.
Organisations I used to work for, Thomas, if you didn't take your leave within a prescribed period, you lost it.
So unfortunately, the laws prevent us from doing that. So,
but let's do it. Councillor Gould.
Chairman, Thomas, thank you for your report. Timeshare of employee FTE. I'm looking at that particular graph there. You've got full-time staff at 287 and part-time staff at 33, which comes to 320. The difference is 55 staff members, which you've got positions available, and yet you've increased the number of positions available in August and September. Is there something we should know about that? Because I've got some other questions too.
Nothing alarming there, Councillor. As I said, it's probably reflective of the fact that at any one time, with regards to our organisational churn, we do have a 19% turnover, so a 19% turnover of 375 probably equates closely to that gap at the moment. So,
One question is to do with the yearly employee turnover. Am I right in thinking that the Aquatic Centre is we talk about September 17, the Aquatic Centre, is 20, is it the council which is 27 to get to that total of 47, or is there 47 staff resigning from the council which is separate to the aquatic centre in that particular month?
Yep. So the museum and the aquatic centre would make up 20, as indicated there, and the rest of council would be 47. So the total is 67.
Okay. Now, as a former employee, that staff turnover is actually quite high per month. And is there something which this council is doing wrong to get staff to leave, or is there something which is happening which we should know about, or is this something which is just normal practice for the Rotorua Lakes Council?
Well,
I'm not sure an accountant is qualified to answer that question.
I don't think this one is. No. If you own a camera shop with 3 employees, 19% is a quarter of one staff member a month. You got to take it into context with the size of the organisation.
All I'll say is that we do benchmark ourselves against the industry, and my understanding is that our turnover and percentage of turnover is not abnormal compared to the rest of industry. So,
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thomas, I know it happens in private enterprise an awful lot, and I did used to undertake it myself, and that with people with excessive annual leave entitlements remaining, we used to buy them back, and quite often, and they were most appreciative of the extra week or 2 or 3 of wage.
So that is something that we do as well. So as an example, one of my staff members who's worked for us for 15 years, I think, had an extremely high leave balance. And we did encourage her to take leave, and a significant amount of leave, and to help facilitate that, and particularly encourage her to take an overseas trip, we did pay out one of those weeks' leave to help manage that. So you do have to look at the circumstances individually, as you know, Councillor Bentley, but yes, that is something we do.
So what are we talking about, Thomas, individually? Are we talking about 30 days, 60 days, 72 days? At the extremes?
Look, there are some extremes. As an example, I'm 31 days, so I reflect on that, but I'm 1 day over, and I can resolve that quite easily next week. I think JP was 60. But then you have to take into account as well, JP's been here a long time, and so, yeah.
No,
sorry, Mr. Chair, I think that's a bit more of a personal local, but
I'm quite happily to give myself as an example, and JP can joke about it as well. But look, there are a varying range of reasons as to under those individual circumstances, and they're being managed individually with those managers. Yeah.
Okay, but I think that the theme you can get from what we've said around this table is that the individual's personal well-being must be paramount. I mean, even if someone's got 60 days, I mean, that's ridiculous. That means they're not taking time out of a year for rest and recreation, and workplaces wouldn't be happy with that sort of situation. So what are you doing to encourage them, other than what you've just explained with one, that's one example? What are you doing to encourage them to extinguish the outstanding leave?
Look, every month managers get reports with regards to the leave balances of their staff, and in particular those that have the higher balances, and they're encouraged to have those discussions with their staff and manage that appropriately in line with their current workloads.
Maxwell?
I would imagine with the long hot summer that we're going to get coming up in January and February, that a lot of this will balance out too, I'm sure. Would that be right, Thomas?
That's correct. Sometimes you do see an increase during this time of year where people are saving up for those summer breaks, yes.
And seconded at this report, and it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Gould and Mr. Waru, and all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Now we'll move over to page 17, and that's the operational report. We'll start with Kaitiaki Māori and Mr. Morrison. Yep, that's here. Welcome, Monty.
Hi, morena tata. Morena, Mr. Chairman. Sorry? Can you turn your microphone?
Morena.
I
Morena,
was
e te
lip reading there
rangatira
for a
nau
while.
mā, haere mai.
Kia ora da. Look, I'll happy to take my report as read. Just to highlight a couple of things. The second statement around our Hapori Rotorua strategy and business plan work has begun with Te Tatau, and I think that's now a work in progress and obviously continuing. The other one is the last point. I returned early Monday morning after 8 days in Santiago, Chile, representing our community at the announcement that you see there of an international conference. The conference is the World Indigenous Business Forum. The work really, my attendance last week was really an announcement last Thursday, was really the combination of a lot of work done by our own tourism office and the team there, hosting the Canadian-based organisers and the New Zealand Trust that has been assembled to deliver the event. So the invitation for me to attend came from the New Zealand group as their kaumātua, and I guess to accept the Māori at that announcement.
Worship?
That's very significant, thank you, to hear that and to know that we'll be hosting such a significant conference. To me, it shows that we're working on that strand of our cultural strength and also a diverse economy. So it'll be an amazing time to bring it back, and we hope we're involved a little bit. I'm sure our members of Te Tata will be there, boots and all, but I hope the wider community gets a bit of a feel too for the added value to our economy. And it's not something that's seen outside, because we've always said the value of we call it the taniwha economy in this region is huge, but we'll start to realise it when we see we're bringing back conferences of that tenor. Well done.
Yes, look, there was about 800 to 1,000 international delegates there, obviously made up of a large group from Chile to explaining their indigenous businesses that are happening there, and I guess the opportunity for us, in not only in Rotorua but throughout the Motu, is to be able to provide an opportunity to showcase indigenous and Māori businesses, which they're estimating now currently at about 50 billion.
Any other questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, thank you, through Mr. Chair. Monty, it is on this last point, the Indigenous Business Forum. So you mentioned there was a New Zealand Trust that would deliver the event. Just a bit interested in the formal name of that entity. Will it have a website? Will we have links to that website? And also a bit of a sense of the media profile around the event?
Yes, look, they've been working very quietly, obviously, up until the announcement, and now there's a series of meetings that are happening to facilitate, because obviously the focus from the international hosts who own the conference was really the delivery of what was happening in Santiago, Chile. So the identity has been established, the trust. Yes, and the name just forgets me as I'm speaking. But it's a small group, but a very diverse group. They've appointed a New Zealand-based professional conference deliverer, and it was through that we've got a relationship through it. And already she has approached various Māori businesses here, including Pukeroa Uruwhata, to support the event, and we've said yes.
The other question from me before I call on Councillor Kawate. Monty, the involvement of local service providers, culture, all those sorts of things will be at the forefront of the Trust's kaupapa in terms of delivering the conference?
Yes, look, delivering conferences is not new for Rotorua, and certainly we've been able to leverage through those relationships a number of experiences that people can only experience here, and certainly the aim is to do exactly that.
Councillor Kawate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll be amazed at how quickly 12 months will go around, and this is just next week sort of thing. Monty, is it the intention to ask for Rotorua whānau or Te Arawa to seek host families for some of our international visitors so they can really gain some appreciation of how we live and do the things that we do, etc.? And I just wondered about that because an early signal of that would allow some of us to put our hands up. Thank you.
Yes, look, I can send you a link of the announcement and speech that I made, and it extended obviously to include those sorts of experiences. So the intent is that people will come early, a whole week earlier, maybe even 10 days earlier, to experience the very things that you're talking about before they come into conference. Obviously, from coming so far, the intention is for them to come early because it's cheaper to fly if they want to go down to the South Island from Winnipeg or Saskatchewan or wherever they happen to be, directly into wherever they want to go, rather than coming here first and then paying a regional airfare to wherever they want to go.
Your Worship.
An associated question, but you've mentioned it here about the Hapori Rotorua. There's going to be some need to get that case developed very quickly. Have you got a timeline for when we will see that be submitted?
Look, I can respond. The only things that I know is the answer is really no, not yet. They've had one meeting, and of course the elections happened, and now the new government's been formed, and we're waiting for new contacts to be able to establish it. But what I do know is that they're very keen to continue the dialogue, and certainly from Te Tato's viewpoint, we're very keen to actually continue that dialogue to get it done as quickly as we can.
Because the showcasing of some product, as well as the other intrinsic values, is going to be quite important for this conference. Yeah.
Mr. Bassani Tule, welcome.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora. Kia ora te rangatira. I don't have extensive knowledge about the Rotorua strategy, but keeping connected with Te Mauri Kingi, he's very excited about what this means for rangatahi in particular, and developing programs. There's still a concern that our language is dying. There's still lots of evidence and statistics to say, despite all the best efforts, some places it's not working. So I think he needs to ground himself in a deeper place of hope. Because if you look at the stats, it looks like we're going backwards. But when you go to the marae, it looks like we're going forward. So he's often confronted with the contradictions of the language. So we'll all have this struggle to develop a business plan positively and openly. Meetings happened last week with our kōeke and with Te Puni Kōkiri, but I think they're still developing a comprehensive strategy.
That's what you're working on, Monty. Excellent. Okay. No further questions. I thank you for your... Councillor Maxwell.
Just wanted to ask, looking forward to the grand opening of Te Akamori, and it's been tremendous that Te Omarangi's been working with it there. Just a quick question, I think it's fantastic. Everything on track for the opening the end of this month?
That will be... I'm going to interrupt Monty. JP will give us...
Oh, is it on your part? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
JP will give us an update shortly. Thank you very much, Monty, for your report. And
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and good luck with your particularly
JP
big job
on the Maori component. Yeah.
with the Chile issue. Trevor, can you turn your mic off, please? JP, page 18, big moves projects, pensioner housing, etc.
Thank you, councillors.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Councillors, I can give an update on the library project, but before I do that, just one of the things that Her Worship raised it previously was the large number of events that have been occurring over the last couple of weeks, mainly outside of normal office hours. So just as a way of trying to make this operational report a little more interesting, we've just put together a bit of a video of some of the different things that have been occurring. So from the communications team. So you've started to see us using video far more, so we just took the opportunity just to pull together some of those events that have happened over the last couple of weeks.
very hard with Rotorua Community Association. What for? To make this a bloody good place to live in.
Lee, would you like to come and cut the other side too?
Not dressed for the occasion.
You're dressed for the occasion, you sure are in the rain.
Can I tie this around now?
Not now.
Hold it. And so that you come under. Between. I declare Te Whāro Community Space officially open.
What I like about this park is that it looks really nice with all the trees and stuff planted, and when the grass grows it's going to be nice and green and it's going to be fun for everyone.
We came here to plant trees to help the community because so that we have trees here for people to look at, and then we can come back when we're older and know that we planted those trees. And it feels really good to just come down here with your friends and stuff, and you can just enjoy it and help the community.
And it's a very cool and fun place to hang out with and be with your friends and family.
Kia ora, I'm Dahlia. I have a store down here in Rotorua. What I love about the farmers market is you've got so many different range of products and stuff here that you cannot buy in shops. I love the shared space here. I love the atmosphere of the market, and it's great to be here.
The thing about Manawa is that the whole community has a place where we can all come together and have events like the farmers market. Enjoy.
What I like about the farmers market is that it's organic and local, and you can see the same people every week and get amazing good products.
It's great to see the cycleways around Rotorua developing, and we can't wait for the Hemo Gorge to be finished and completed, and a great access point to the forest for all riders, keeping us safer.
The ways are great. Really enjoyed going around the roundabout today. Have ridden from Nongata to Rotorua and back again. Absolutely awesome. Took the family. Great day out.
Well done, JP.
Thank you, councillors.
I hope that's on our website.
I think it should be. I'm looking across at Ingrid and
on
the team
Facebook
who
as well.
are working really hard just to make sure we're cataloguing some of the things that are happening and occurring through the district. It's just a shame that we appear to just have a stock standard rainy day approach to everything. So looking forward to the summer as the best time to take leave.
Now, a couple of questions have been asked about. A couple of questions have been asked about the Rotorua New Library and Children's Health Hub, which I've deferred till your report. I wonder if you could address those.
Yes, I certainly can, councillors. Councillors, our project contractor Fletchers they've been experiencing some problems, and some problems getting subcontractors and sufficient tradies to complete the job on time as predicted. So they're under a huge amount of pressure, and this has really pushed our completion date out by a month. So we were looking at having parts of the building opened by the end of November, but some of it wouldn't be. And really from a health and safety perspective, we've looked at that and said really we do need to defer the opening that had been planned for the 25th of November. So because of that, and because of that project completion now being out a month to mid to late December, we're really deciding now to say, well, let's take all of January to ensure we're able to get the library moved cleanly across from its temporary premises back into the new premises, and it also gives the DHB the chance to make that decant out of its various sites into the building as well. So therefore we're looking at sort of preparing for an opening now in early February. So they really, it's been a huge amount of pressure that's been coming back really onto the library staff. So as Fletchers continue to see the slight creep of trying to get different parts of the building complete and bringing enough subcontractors and tradespeople to complete those elements. What we were seeing was really the 3-week program which was required to move all of the library back into its new premises being progressively squeezed towards the 25th of November. And again, that's health and safety issue of operating the library whilst it's still a construction site was just seen as not appropriate. So we're really just pushing that back out to February and giving us the chance to see the building completed fully before both the library and the DHB move in through January.
So are there any cost implications because the contractor can't perform?
At this stage, we'll have to have the conversation with Fletchers about what this means as far as some of the expenditure to date and as we close it off, but no.
Questions on that particular topic? Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Gould.
So through you, Mr. Chair, JP, do you envisage no soft opening, so it'll be official opening and then, and supplementary to that, what about Jean Batten Square and also Hope Upper Street road treatments? So when they're finished, will they be opened for public access or is the whole site going to be locked up till opening day? That's my question.
There's a good question, and I think the soft opening was almost what we were going to see, because with the DHB part not being completed by the end of November, we would have had the library opening, but it's still potentially being a part construction site. So really we didn't want that to occur, because I think you really lose the impact of what will be a stunning building and a stunning joint facility. So to open it with the library in there and then be waiting for the DHB to move in once their construction was finished because of this month delay, it is really just not doing a service to what we're creating there and to the teams that have to operate in that environment. As far as the street is concerned, the street will certainly be opened. So when that is completed, it will be opened. Obviously it's a traffic route. With Jean Batten Park, again, we're just having a conversation about what that means as far as the area is concerned. As you know, Fletchers are also working still on the eyesight. So as part of their site management, they were moving and have moved all of their buildings, their portacoms to the back of the eyesight. So I think in answer to your question, Jean Batten Park will be opened as much as is available once it's complete, but there will be a sort of site area for their teams who are working in the eyesight to continue to undertake that work.
Councillor Donaldson?
Yeah, thank you for that answer, because my main concern was the holiday season and the night market, hugely popular during that period, and Hope Upper Street and access to those public areas is key to the flow around the inner city, especially during that holiday season. So thank you for that.
Sir Gould.
Chairman, thank you for your comments, JP. When you mentioned that the project's been pushed back a month to end of December, does that mean the Health Hub can move in January and open in January, or will the Health Hub and the library be open at the same period of time? 2nd and 3rd of February?
The intention is that, we're obviously talking to the DHB who are looking at moving a lot of staff out of different facilities where they're currently placed. This actually gives us the opportunity to open the doors with both services available together at the same time. So what we'd previously been set up to do with the opening was that we would be opening the library area, but the DHB area would just be open for people to see on that open day, but they would not be opening or providing services from there on the 25th. So now it's a chance for us to actually say, look, there's plenty of time for everyone to move in correctly, get set up well, and be ready to open together.
Your Worship.
Yes, I think this is a very logical call. I wouldn't want a grand opening without the Children's Hub being active and busy and showing how co-location really can work. And if you go back to those that were concerned about the library, they showed concerns that you could never put these two activities together. So we want to show our community that they coexist and work together very well with the beautiful playground and the roading changes. So I think you won't get the big hit if you do it in incremental stages with soft openings. We're so used to very complex projects, and this is the most complex because it's two providers. I think the delay is fine, and I think of the other issue about staff over Christmas, and I just think they can have their leave and then come back and we'll start the new year in a very positive fashion, and I think that's a good thing for our community.
Worship, just adding to that, and Stuart and Jane have quite a comprehensive program to achieve the relocation. They learnt a lot when they moved out to the temporary premises, so they had a very clear plan of how they were going to come back to minimise the actual time when the library was closed. So she's feeling a lot more relaxed now that she has the full and sufficient time to enable them to set up the new shelving, set up the new furniture, but also to start packing out of the temporary library to minimise the actual closure between the two facilities. So I think this is really going to help make sure that we can open the facility in the way it deserves to be opened.
JP, I thought the 24th of November was ambitious as well. However, based on the report we got at our last committee meeting, with all the funders who've come on board, I agree with your worship that it's logical that we put it out till early February, 1, so that the whole facility is operational, and 2, that we can showcase it, as others have said, recognising these other funders who've just come out of the woodwork. Huge amounts of money to make sure that it is a top-class facility. The question I have of you is, how soon can those portacoms and all that get out of Jean Batten Park? Because I'd hate to have it opened, and in the background of the TV we've got Fletcher's portacoms, toilets and God knows what else in the background in early February. So I just wanted to know, how soon will they be out of the eyesight?
Councillor, I'm not entirely sure what the timing is now, but obviously this does give us that chance to see the completion of what was to be phase 2 of the eyesight. Remember, we've got it split into sort of 3 phases, so that northern end with the clock tower has now been completed, so that's where the current eyesight services are operating out of. The work that's currently underway is that middle section, and the final piece was to the south. So my understanding, and I take your point on board, I can check with that team and just see whether this extra bit of time also enables us to really showcase actually what is both sides of Jean Batten Park, which are lovely. So the back of the eyesight is extremely nice perspective from the park, or will be, once those portacoms are removed.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've covered it as well as Your Worship the Mayor. I didn't realise it was being changed. I was looking forward to the opening, but I'd rather go to the opening when you've explained it all, when's the best time, and that's logical. And also my own NZCT colleagues were wanting to be here too, so I think it is better the new date that's been set.
Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Hunt?
Only one further comment to add to those, and I think opening the road in Hope Up Street will be really beneficial. It'll allow the whole community to understand where the parking is, who the parking's for, how to navigate that at a slow speed, so that and including Jim Batten Square, to see how that works in that space. So while it's unfortunate and both Fletcher's issues and the weather have delayed a number of our projects, it's the most pragmatic response. It does take the pressure off leading up to Christmas, which is stressful for everyone anyway, and it's unfortunate, but I think that this is the best outcome, and we all look forward to a date being set in February for the wonderful opening.
Thank you, councillors, and I suppose it does highlight the challenges faced by our main contractor, Fletcher's, in obtaining sufficient amount of time from the tradespeople and the subcontractors. There's a lot of work out there, and everyone is busy, and it's really creating some real headaches for them when they're trying to do one task and they've got the painters ready to come in, or someone to lay the carpet, and just one piece delayed because of another piece of work starts throwing out their timing significantly. And that's really what's rippled through the last month for them, is the many moving pieces and the availability of those work people.
Side of the design concepts, JP, but there is a cafe type situation included in the complex.
Councillors, we made the decision quite early on not to include a cafe within the library building. What we've got is almost a coffee cart and suitable seating areas that people can get a coffee at within the building, or a muffin. But there's also a focus on a cafe being available out of the eyesight just across the park. So it's really that view of how that precinct will operate in its entirety.
Thank you for refreshing my memory. Are there any other matters councillors have that they want to ask, or there's anything you want to highlight, JP, in your report? I'll take it as read. Are there any other questions? Councillor Metapeka-Reikawate.
We're on the strategy group, aren't we? Thank you very much. It is around the, thank you, Mr. Chair, it's around the pensioner housing. And I know, and I want to refer to something that Councillor Sturt sent out, and it was the conference in Australia that's coming up in February, and it's actually on retirement housing, pensioner housing, the whole gambit. And as councillors will know, that last year I did go to a conference in, obviously representing another organisation, and that was on housing. And I mean, housing, whether it's housing for families, whether it's transitional housing, social housing, affordable housing, retirement, and housing for older people, is a big issue in most countries now. But at that conference, and I suspect it'll be the same again because it's in Australia, there were private investors there, there were banks, obviously, there were philanthropic organisations, which surprised me because they're getting into, they've got big dollars available, and they're getting into looking at what they can do in the housing space, NGOs and councils as well, and developers too. And they brought forward models that they had, examples of models that they'd been put up and erected around various parts of Australia. And I just see that there is real value in getting somebody to that conference, staff member or whoever, and because what I have seen in New Zealand is we don't have the good thinking that brings on board all these other people. I mean, the philanthropic organisations in New Zealand, they shy away from anything like that, and yet this is the sort of thing that they're expecting now. Overseas, I went to the Philanthropy New Zealand conference the other day, and we had international speakers, a couple of months ago, we had international speakers, and they were saying, what is the contribution these days of these big organisations? And it is to grow their community, and housing. People are dependent on housing, and so it's just the new thinking that we need to get into this country, and absolutely through councils. We shouldn't be doing it all ourselves, obviously, but we should be to the forefront with new ideas to say how can we help people in Rotorua who want to invest in housing, whatever that type of housing that might be. So I just think that there is merit to Jeff in looking at that looking at that, because councils were well represented at that conference that I went to earlier. Was it earlier this year? I think it was it last year, or earlier this year, and I'm sure there'd be a lot of value to be gained should we get somebody there from staff.
Thank you, Mayor Becker, for raising it, because I saw it as an opportunity. Whilst we may not be the doers, we will be the catalyst. And already an announcement this week of someone investing. I didn't buy the Daily Post, but I saw the $20 million billboard outside a shop saying there's a $20 million investment in retirement housing, or I may be wrong, I'm not sure. So Councillor Rakawa-Tate is right that maybe we, from a building consent point of view, a land availability point of view, yeah, but I understand that the new government has removed the special housing areas of the Accord. So we've got an Accord, but there were special housing areas that were designated that certain developers were trying to partner with the central government and get underway before the election. And of course now that I believe that's under review. So JP, maybe, I don't know whether it's you or Jeff, comment on what Councillor Rakawa-Tate said in terms of this organisation being upskilled in the new ways of thinking in terms of housing. I mean, we haven't had a penchant for apartments or things like that in this town, and our district plan doesn't really encourage that either. But, so I'd like to hear your comment.
Councillor, and I'll try and keep it focused, but I think the first statement I'd say, and it's something that the Chief Executive and Henry and I have been talking about before, is there is no single solution here. It is a number of different initiatives and actions we need to take to deal with what is a wide problem. And so the recommendation that we continue to learn and try and learn from innovative practices in other places and through some of these conferences, I think is an excellent one. The portfolio lead in that sort of space, or the strategy lead in that space, Rosemary, has been to a number of different meetings and has been working through a process. We looked at our own delivery of our pensioner housing units, and that's what's kicked off some of the discussions with a number of different organisations. I think the diversity of models has actually left a lot of people unable to progress further. So the expressions of interest process was intended to sort of bring to the table, so what would someone do in that community housing trust space? I think also, in picking up on a statement of the councillor, we are quite lucky philanthropically that Bay Trust is extremely interested in being a party and investing in social and community housing, and they have. Which I think is an excellent position they've taken, and certainly in Whakatane and through the Tauranga area. So they are waiting and watching and wanting to be a partner in anything that comes out through our expressions of interest process. So I think there is some good thinking going into it, but it's the need to get some movement and continue to learn. So I think the conference would be a valuable step in what will have to be a number of actions and initiatives by this council.
Wale.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, JP. Tēnā koe I o kōrero. My question relates to the pension housing thing also. You mentioned the significance and engagement policy. So what option would trigger that, the provisions of that particular policy?
We have it as a significant asset, so we would have to consult on anything we do. Now, one of the actions and one of the options that is always on the table is only to transfer the management. So we retain the ownership of the assets, and what you're doing is actually handing over the collection of the rent, management of the tenants, and those wraparound social services that we've talked about as being critical to that total picture. And then with that, management provides a cash flow opportunity for something like a community housing trust to grow the number of units as well. So they invest then on the basis of managing our assets, providing those wraparound services to expand it. But I think the short answer is anything we do in that area, because we've identified it as a strategic asset, requires public consultation. So what we're getting back from this expressions of interest process is some options on the table for council to consider, and for us then to test through engagement with our community as to whether they see it as being a valuable way forward.
Questions? Okay, so Thomas, you're going to give us a verbal presentation on the sports train, and the rest is Davros. Thomas, welcome back.
Thank you, Chair.
Leave while you've been sitting down there.
Yes, I did. Councillors and board members, in our continuing focus of improving our facilities, we've turned our gaze towards the sports drome, and it's probably crept below the radar for many people, particularly yourselves and the public. And unfortunately, the weather has delayed us, me presenting you a nice PowerPoint presentation of the finished product, but it is being finished today. And so what we've done is that we've had a look at that facility with regards to being built and completed in 1963 and whether it was fit for purpose with regards to what was happening in that. And for many people, they didn't actually realise that it is one of our highest used facilities for sport, in particular for basketball. Rotorua, that uses it 5 times a week. And well over 2,000 people, and including children, I understand, use that facility. So what we've done is we've started on the inside and worked our way out. The 2 of the changing rooms that were built back in 1963 had unfortunately been closed, so they have been tidied up and reopened. And the whole foyer has had a revamp as well to make it more fit for purpose for how it was being used and modernised. And so it has now got a complete refresh inside with regards to the amenities in there, the toilets in particular. And then we moved our way to the outside. So I think the ultimate goal was always to be that the building would be seamless with regards to the EEC. And so we have removed the asbestos cladding, which needed to go anyway, and replaced it with similar cladding to the EEC and spouting. And so hopefully in the next week, when those last bits are finished, it will be and feel one seamless building, and is also, with regards to the significant investment inside, will hopefully be a lot more usable and friendly for those well over 2,000 people that use it on a weekly basis. So I will bring you some photos next O&M, because unfortunately the weather did delay the cladding outside. It's a familiar story this year, I know, with regards to weather delays. But if you do have the time, I would encourage you to go down there this weekend. There is a rather large indoor hockey tournament where teams are coming from around New Zealand, and you can see some of the changes that have been take place. But just bear in mind, the outside is still a little bit further to go in the next week.
I appreciate that, Thomas. The sports room was iconic in its day in 1963, but those toilets that have been there since then were not iconic. There is one particular person, a guy called Bandy Hewitt, who was one of the founders for raising the community funding. That's Rebecca Hewitt, who was a New Zealand diving champion. It's her father. And the community raised all the money. There was no council money put into the establishment and the build of the sports drome. So I think it deserves that. I've just had one comment. It's really good you're doing what you're doing. Can someone have a look at the backing boards for the basketball courts, please? They need replacing. They're from 1963, and Rob's got that in hand, I understand.
Yeah, that's being looked at, yes.
Thank you. Any questions on the sports drome?
Thank you, Thomas. My question's just around the vintage of the building. So it's been there 54 years, and we seem to have all these seismic issues cropping up. And, you know, it was a bit of a shock to some of us that we spent the money we did on the library, then to find that it was a leaky building, we didn't fix the roof at the same time. So are there any seismic issues, or does the sports drome meet code, given its, you know, the land it's situated on, that sort of thing? I just wanted some reassurance around that.
It was seismically reviewed several years ago and is structurally sound. Otherwise, we would have taken the opportunity to address any issues as well. But based on the the information that we have at the moment is, that's fine.
Yes, Councillor Maxwell finally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, good getting an update on the sports drone that's been there for us for a long time, and I think I went down to a tournament just recently, and there was, yeah, and you're right, the basketball used it a lot, and they've been very good people in there. My own granddaughter plays in the tournaments and that there. Tell me, are we going to have is it just going to, are we going to have a soft opening or just go straight into business as usual?
I think the intention was just to go business as usual.
Okay, so there won't be for the users of it. And the other one, Mr. Chairman, you raised something about people who raised a lot of money in that before. The only reason I asked if there was going to be a opening or an afternoon tea or something, I do remember that the Maori community there was a competition going on for organisations who can raise the most, and whoever raised the most becomes the queen or the king. So I was going to say that you invite Ionine Waka along to the afternoon tea or the opening, because she was crowned the queen because they raised the most funds and that for the sports room at the time. Yeah.
I think we can make a decision whether we have a soft opening. I mean, it's not going to cost a hell of a lot of money for an afternoon tea, and just recognise some of these people who played a role in it. Yeah, so we'll leave that with staff to take on board. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Maxwell. Page 20. That's thank you, Thomas. The infrastructure group with Stavros. Welcome, Stavros. And if you'd like to highlight your report, take it as read, but there are matters in there that need attention. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said, I'll take the report as read. There are 3 or 4 items I would like to highlight for your attention, and no doubt I will be ready to receive some questions from you. With regards to our strategic corridor planning, following advice that we are just about to see the tenders going out for the Sala and Tarawera intersection, upgrades from NCTA, so hopefully we'll be able to see some physical works in the early part of 2018. The consultant tender for the Amo House Street Central Corridor has been awarded, and again we expect those to proceed to the final design with our involvement in order to come to tenders, to proceed to tenders in early 2018. And of course we are waiting the new government's position with regards to funding for the major 4-laning to the airport at this point in time. The other area I would like to highlight is that our wastewater treatment water services expression of interest closed last night. We received 5 significant consortia interest for those from that request. My staff and myself will be involved in screening those expressions of interest with a view of narrowing them down to no more than 3 to proceed to the request for tenders early from January onwards, and I think that will take at least 6 months to go through the due diligence process before we reach a recommendation one way or the other, for your consideration in due time in the next calendar year. The other areas we are continuing to making progress is the implementation of the Rotorua wastewater rediculation scheme. The wastewater treatment plant tender is out and expect to close next week on the 20th of November. The rediculation design will be out for tender either later in December or early January, with a view of starting works in March for the rediculation of Rotorua first and the treatment plant construction at the same time. In terms of other activities, we are continue to try to secure our drinking water sources, and we have ongoing discussions with them for the Taniwha Spring, which we hope to be able to proceed to a resource consent by March this year for a continuation of water for them, of supply of water from that area. And I'm sure you will have some questions, so I'm ready to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I wonder if you could, sorry, Stavros, thank you for your update. I wonder if you could just clarify a little bit on the intention for Springfield-Otonga intersection.
Councillors may remember that over the last 12 months we had a number of conversations about that. We have explored the possibility of improving that intersection with regards to the safety of kids in that area, and we have explored a number of options, including the full signalization of the intersection, or another option with a hybrid option to signalize only two legs of that intersection. However, following a more detailed videotaping of that intersection, we identified that perhaps the risks were more with the signalization because of drivers might not be attuned to the sudden interruption of their journeys. So we are at the moment have opted to formalize pedestrian crossings on the north and west of the intersection, with courtesy crossings on the south and east. And that work is intended to start, over the next few weeks, with a view of completing during summertime.
As a supplementary thank you for that. Do you have available for viewing the Tarawea concept plans with regard to the roundabout?
I don't have at the moment, but I will have as soon, because the design will be finalized, for going for tenders, and there will be no roundabout in Tarawea, there will be a signalized intersection.
You will publicise the design concepts?
Correct.
Councillor Gould.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your report, Stavros. I want to ask you a question on page 20. When you've got status update on other Rotorua Transport Network capital projects, you've got the annual resealing program is underway and pre-seals. Affected residents have been notified about 65 kilometres of local roads to be resealed. What's the percentage been urban and rural, and will this be done in this financial year, or are you going to have to extend it because of the bad weather we've had in the last number of months?
No, the intention is to complete our resealing program in quarters 2 and 3, which means ending in March. If we don't finish resealing by March, we miss the boat, basically, because the weather changes. The rough percentage of urban versus rural, it's about 20% is urban and 80% is rural.
Otawa Basani Tuli.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Stavros. Thank you for your report. Just two quick questions. One around Te Manawa and traffic flow. Has there been any public feedback about the goods and the bads of Te Manawa? And the second one is just, how are car parks in the CBD allocated and revoked? There's just been something in Tūtanakai Street. I think 3 car parks had plants put outside, and yeah, there was a bit of confusion amongst some of the shop owners.
First question, Te Manawa obviously opened last weekend, and it's a shared zone facility. There are some teething issues, with regards to people getting used, to the shared, user facility. I think, as I said repeatedly, the design received a safety audit pre-construction. We fully intend to monitor the activities of the public, in that zone, and by the end of November, we will initiate another, post opening safety audit to identify any areas that continue to work. From my perception, I think we are 99% there. There are a few people who still don't get the, the basic, principles behind it, but it's like everything else, we will continue to work through. The second question with regards to Artisan Cafe on Tūtanakai Street. A request came from the cafe owners to utilize existing public space, i.e. road parking space, as a mini park, in a mini cafe, an outdoor area. We have agreed to trial a period between November and April this year. in order to see whether it's functioning effectively, the effect it may have, and so on. It is quite common practice in many modern cities to have outdoor sittings, for people. And of course, it adds vibrancy and, and resiliency and, the sense of people being active in the CBD and the revitalization of the CBD. So we have agreed to run this trial for the next few months, and we'll take it from there. We have consulted with the block champions in the business sector, and we receive a favorable, response to that. And as I said, it's a trial. We evaluate it, and personally, I think it will be something we'll see more and more in the future. I think Rotorua has got the nice environment and the weather and the visitors, and I think seeing more people sitting outside is quite, infectious.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with regard to Te Manawa, Stavros, did we have full consultation with the fire department? That's question one. And the second question is with regard to this green carpet that's gone down to Tanakai Street area. Who has paid for that, and are we charging the person that benefits from it a reasonable rent?
Te Manawa, all parties, or I suppose all the road users, the publication of Te Manawa and the design control, I think, was forwarded to all departments, relevant departments, including the police and fire service and utilities and so on. So I'm not aware of any concerns with regards to access. Certainly the carriageway is designed to accommodate the move of heavy vehicles, As I said, earlier, I think it's only extremely long vehicles are not, they have some difficulty navigating the turning radius, in that side. The green carpet, do you mean the Artisan Cafe in Councillor Bedley? Is that on the Artisan Cafe on Titanikai? Well, at this point in time, there is no leasing or charges. This is a trial basis, and if that becomes something that we want to follow on a more widespread and permanent basis, obviously we have to consider the cost of using public space for, for business undertakings, but, we're not there yet until we evaluate whether we want to expand it or not.
Ross, I owned Diane Dairy when the CBD was redeveloped. We lost 4 car parks on each corner. To see a green tacky carpet with a few shrubs taking up parking spaces, for me, is not on. Yes, let the trial occur, but at the end of the day, there's a convenience store on the corner and others that rely on people driving in and driving out quickly, not long-term parkers. So I have to question the logic behind allowing the trial to occur at that location. So the person at Diane Dairy and the one next door were not consulted. You might have said the champions were consulted, and I know the inner city people were consulted, but the actual users of the businesses, who's going to compensate them if their business goes down? I mean, these are all issues. You can't let this lag on for 2 or 3 months if it's already costing these people money by the day, because people can't park in those 3 car parks, which was strategically placed there when I owned it, because we lost 4 on Tanakai Street and we lost 4 on Arawa Street. Then the bombshell, they stopped people coming from Tanakai Street across Arawa Street to the other side of Arawa Street by putting the Berlin Wall in. So these people, if it starts impacting on them, I believe the trial needs to be pulled as soon as possible. And it's not to be anecdotal. Go and talk to them. They're waiting for someone to come and see them.
Mr. Chair, that's valuable feedback, and as I said earlier, obviously we will receive a number of, a significant body of feedback, and we've got to balance all that, all that input into the process and make some decisions.
The question I've got is on the stormwater and the land drainage. Are we involved in the mitigation works, particularly on the Wairiti stream? Because there were bulldozers in there yesterday. Because all these properties along the riverbanks and the lakefront areas, the erosion has been horrific. Environment Bay of Plenty are responsible for lake levels and the management of those lake levels. So Are we involved in that mitigation, Stavros?
The management of main water courses like the Waititi stream, and other streams, Utuhina and so on, all is under the control of the land management and stormwater management, for the regional council. The works you see down there is regional council undertaking. For the first time after our prompting in recent years, they have now allocated resources to ensure the capacity of those streams is meeting its design standards. Historically, they did not, and one of the natural consequences of that is to impose limitations on land development because their stormwater system were not meeting its capacities. Now we are asking them to ensure that their water courses meet the design capacity before they actually start imposing limitations to the land development.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Stewart, you raise a very good issue about the closing of Rotorua Street, and I know that at some point the opening up of that and how that works as a thoroughfare will be discussed, because that's part of also reducing the traffic through the city and making people who want to go around the city to go across it to actually go around it. So that does raise that issue. But I have a question, Stavros, about the number of P15 parks in that area, because one of the comments from one of those owners is that it is the people in businesses who are parking in essentially shopping car parks. Now, we know this is an issue all over town. It's not just an issue there. So if business owners and their staff actually parked away from their businesses and away from everyone else's businesses, then those car parks would function as they are, which is for shoppers to go to the businesses. So I just wondered how many P15 were there, because I know in other areas we have, due to feedback, increased some of the parking 15.
Councillor Hunt, I'm sorry, I don't have I don't have the numbers in my head, but yeah, I think in forum number 4, we've made to you a presentation of parking services, especially in the CBD, with a view of revisiting our general parking policy, both in the core CBD, the periphery of the CBD, and the peripheral areas that now totally free of charge. And we would come back to you around February with some range of recommendations along the lines of conversations. But I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers of how many P50s are in that area there, but I can check it out anyway. I don't know.
One further comment, I think the whole point of a trial for our community is that we can see how it works, and there will always be people who are unsure, and at the end of it we'll analyse how it has worked, and we'll take everyone's opinions and needs into consideration, because it does look at the wider picture, and it's a perfect time over summer to do that. So I think I just ask people to be a little open to newness at this point. Certainly in Palmerston North, if you've been there, they have them and they're hugely popular. It's just started. It does need chairs and tables and umbrellas, and that will happen. So I just ask for that little bit of patience while something new in this city has a chance to see whether it's something for us.
It's all very well and good, Councillor Hunt, but when you go and buy your Sunday paper at 10 o'clock down at Diandera, you try and get a park. You got Destiny Church. You've got to look at the whole landscape, just not what people want to dine out on the street. Councillor Rotorua takes. Got to have an open mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and I definitely am prepared to have an open mind. I'm so pleased that the little parklets are underway. They are great. I think that they will eventually, by all concerned, or certainly by most concerned, be supported. And you're right, it's a trial. But from what I've heard in the very short time, that people just think they're great. And we seem to be reluctant from time to time. We cannot develop our city around around car parks. And we seem to do that so often. We worry about the car parks rather than thinking about what's the long-term value that's going to be created from there. But I just wanted to say also to councillors that from the initial feedback I've had, and as you do know, I live in the city, from Te Manawa, that is well supported by people now coming into the city. It's just made such a difference. We see it. I was there at the opening. You could see that was a picture of my rear I could spot myself in the little video, but it's been well received, and it's early days yet. So that's just some positive feedback on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You, Councillor Kawate. Any further questions, Your Worship?
I'm going to climb in too to this, and I think we need to look at it inner city. We have an inner city portfolio, and the street captains, and there are also retailers in there, and I think the changes are fantastic. Incremental change, and that includes bringing in trials. And parklets are something like shared spaces. They were shock horror. You can't co-share a space, and look at how easily people are slowly adapting. I think we've got to trial all sorts of things. Look, I heard from a retailer who said when at the opening of Te Manawa, she said that her boss came down from Auckland the week before the opening, saw the potential of that big shared space, and bought them a new coffee machine because they're going to get more business. Now that's what we were trying to do when you think of what we tried to do back in 2013, and we do need to keep trialling things. There are lots of other things that came up in the ideas store that I think need coming out and shaking down again to see were there other cool ideas that the community gave us. Little areas where people can put bean bags and deck chairs and just sit outside in little parts of the side streets or avenues. And I think those are the ideas that now we've done the big move, which was Te Manawa, we can now look at the other ideas. And I trust a process led by a councillor with an inner city portfolio group working with you. And I think that's the time for trialling things rather than going back to the old ways. So I'm right in there.
Other questions? You've got a question, Stavros, of yourself. Oh, you want to make a comment? Yeah. Judge? Kima.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Just getting back to that parklet idea. I think, as you said, it's a trial, but I think it's coming at the expense of a couple of businesses at the moment that have stood up and vehemently against it. And for every report that we are being told over here, but it's not a report that's for being positive, and I'm not being negative over here, but for everyone that can come and say over here, or such and such people have said that it's really glowing and Manawa is really great for the city, and as is the parklet, there are 10 to 20 people out there that are saying against, but we're not going to bring that over here. So there's a fairly balanced perspective going into this, right? And we can't be beating the drums all the time saying that it's all hunky-dory. There is a hue and a cry out there as well. So this parklet thing, we need to be very carefully how we trade onto this, because the public's perception is very much on us. We are like their KPIs as well. You know, they are judging us all the time. And while it may be successful in all other cities, it probably doesn't have to be successful over here. It's a great idea. And next thing, lovely India might ask for a parklet like that. Tandoori Palace will stay and say, oh, it's successful. What's good for them has to be good for us. So we just need to be very careful to boost one business. Let's not kill 3 others. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Councillor Kima. Stavros, did you want to say anything? Because I'd love to see a trial outside the Fat Dog and see how long that business lasts. Your Worship?
I'm sure you have a question, but you know, at the opening of Te Manawa, and I'm not all, Pollyanna about the changes. I think there are some tweaks that we're going to have to do, and you have to work with the businesses. But there were many people that said once our population hits about 100,000, wait and look at Tūtanakai Street. It could be a boulevard. And that's the sort of thinking that we should be saying, that do we want that clutter where we also have retail or more people coming into to Tanakai Street and enjoying the whole ambience and the retail and the experience. So, you know, it will come, but we've got to be careful, as you say, about not killing off businesses. So it is working with them to make sure that what we're doing is not going to be detrimental.
I agree with you, Your Worship. New thinking is great, but their business has been there since 1927. It's part of Rotorua's history, and they just want some consideration to be listened to. So if it starts affecting the business, how quick on your feet are you going to be to help them out? That's the question. Then try it down at the Fat Dog, see if they love it. Someone else have their hand up? Oh, it'd be fabulous, wouldn't it? Councillor Donaldson. Yeah, I don't think it's a laughing matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to put a plug in for one of our digital tools called Park Rotorua. But before I did, could I just ask Stavros, because it tells me right now there's 1 to 5 car parks in the block, either side of Diane Dairy. Is that app working properly at present? Is it working off the information from our parking sensors? Do you know, or is it something that will be included in the RFP for parking services going forward?
The general utilization on the sensors information are working, depending on, on time of the day sometimes, but, the general consensus for parking occupancy onto Tanakai Street, it's about 70%. So at any given time, you've got about 30% of vacancy into Tanakai Street. Sometimes, yes, you probably have to walk about 20 meters to get to a destination, and and that's that's a significant challenge for some people, I suppose. But the reality is that we do need to take into considerations everyone's concerns. I acknowledge all the comments here. As I said, we will put it into a feedback package and and evaluate the going forward. But I don't think there's a black and white answer to anything. It's sometimes you have to try something to identify the positives and the negatives and make some decisions to go forward.
Yes.
I wanted to make a comment which I thought would be some questions about the waste, because number of issues came around the table, and my chief financial officer also identified that some potential for some variance to our waste costs. I'm also aware personally that there is a certain component of the industry who's asking persistent questions about waste, and I wanted to clarify a couple of things for councillors to be aware of. Our general waste activity cost of our waste activity comprises of 3 parts. One is our collection contract with Smart Environmental. This is now, it's actually 1 November, it was 1 year. That contract goes smack on its contract. There is no deviation to cost of that contract whatsoever. And I don't anticipate that with deviation. And as a matter of fact, the contract requires the contractor to absorb the first 1.5% of the CPI every year before any CPI adjustments. So there's no deviation from that. The second component is a landfill management through waste management, and the current process of closing the landfill, creating a transfer station up there, capping the landfill, and proceeding forward. The deviation we've got at the moment, and again, I would like to, suppose, impress upon you, this is about a year since we started the contracts. We have achieved a significant increase in our recycling by about 70%, from 3,000 tons to 5,000 tons. It's still not good enough. We aim to get 7,000 tons of recyclables. We've got another 2,500 tons of recyclables. The swap analysis we have undertaken in April, in May this year, and we reported here to this committee, identified that some 48% of the materials going to our waste bins, for landfilling from our houses, are potentially recyclables. And that's right. Now, in various components. So we do have a long road ahead of us, to educate the public that they need to do some more recycling. Having said that, we also have, over the last 12 months, if you recall, we were making an effort to harmonize our target level waste management 17-18, the annual plan. For one reason or the other, we are not able to, to conclude it pending the rural, communities, decisions and so on. And we stayed as we were for another year until the new LTP. What we have is that we have also a significant number of people who historically opted out of the rubbish collection system, if you recall. And this year, we removed the right to opt out. So they came into the system. We also got a growth in our population on top of that. We also got an economy that is growing. The only variance which is at risk for us at the moment, it's the amount of waste we anticipated to collect in landfill, and we anticipate to be around the area about 9,000 tons a year, we are hoping, and we are still to around $12,000 a year. So we still got at least 2,500 tons of waste that potentially could be removed from the waste bins into the recycling bins. And we need to continue to work in that process, to engineer that sort of culture change. However, I would like, the Council's tolerance in this respect that this is 1 year of a long-term contract. You have made a significant change in the waste management for the district, and it will take us a bit more time to get there. And yes, we do have some budgetary risks in that, which is I put at this point in time around the $300,000 mark, on the overall $7 million package, of the activity. And we will do everything we can to minimize that and mitigate that. But that's the only part of the contract that runs the risk of some variance, because we are not changing our culture fast enough, and we have to do more work to engineer that to take place. Thank you.
Question then, how long do we wait for that trend, that 48% trend to turn around? And what leverages have we got to alter that behaviour? Because you just go along and see the lid flipped up and you can see all the things in the red bins that should be in the yellow bin. And people are only using the red bin because it gets collected every week. Nothing's going into recycling bins. You can drive up and down the street on the day of the recycling is collected, and there's hardly any bins in certain areas of town. There are no yellow bins out. In other areas of town, it's strewn up the street and it's fantastic. So how do we overcome that? Is there, can we find them, or, what's going to landfill is really concerning me.
There is, as I said, there are a number of options we will put in front of you by February with the LTP, and one of the options is actually to, and I don't want to preempt the debate obviously. One of the options is to provide household a secondary another bin to put organic material in it. So that green and food and green waste together, so can be collected weekly, and reducing the residual waste, and that residual waste can be collected fortnightly. On the other thing too, we're also trying to encourage our standardization of waste levy to capture all these anomalies into the system, and will come through your LTP. But at the same time, we need to continue to educate people they've got options. The things that we have made is options around through the waste management strategy we have embraced last year. If you go to the landfill, for example, give you a simple example, you got a trailer with commingled material. You pay $39. Well, if you make some effort to separate your green waste, your wood, your concrete, and so on, your trailer drops to $15. So it's less than half the costs. If you have a truck that's commingled waste, if you try and make an effort to separate your green waste or concrete and the timber, you only pay instead of $153 a ton, you pay $46 a ton. So the price leverage and incentives are there, we just have to sort of incentivize people enough to get on and ask themselves, do I need to pay $150 a ton, or can I do some separation and make it, pay $46 a ton? So it is. I don't think there is a simple answer to that, but at the end of the day, we do have a growing success for our waste collection system. We've got the highest, high level of participation. Our recyclables are growing. We still got a significant way to go to achieve our targets, and we'll continue to work in that direction.
I've just got a question about this court case that Regional Council are taking us on, and am I right, or could you clarify for me, that when we got abatement notices prior to this level, which I think is a waste of ratepayers' money actually, didn't we spend money on the plant to the landfill to appease the abatement notice? Could you just clarify what we did spend there?
The charges relate to, there are 6 charges, but they relate basically to two activities. One of the activities are the green waste separation. And in June, July last year, we received an abatement notice because a lot of stormwater washing of the green waste was carrying with it E. coli, bacteria with it. And we received an abatement notice. We worked with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. We've done the works we have agreed to do. It cost us about $180,000 from memory to do that work, and they agreed that we've done what we're supposed to do. In March and April this year, especially with the heavy, cyclones that were impacting onto this, the systems we implemented, they were overwhelmed. And they said, well, that's not good enough. It should be under no circumstances to escape again. And we're defending that and says, well, in all practical terms, we've done whatever we could, and the inundation was of such magnitude that caused the HGAM catastrophe, and obviously, no system can cope without any, an impact. That's where we are.
For that update, Stavros, I mean, the mere fact that we've got ratepayers suing the same ratepayers is just ridiculous. I mean, I'd rather be at a work level that you've cooperated with regional council, so all power to you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Concerning the recycling, there's a problem with plastic wrap, either plastic bubble paper or plastic bags or plastic sheets. My recycling bin this week is full. My red bin, a quarter of it is taken up with the plastic wrap. So we really need to look at sometime in the future how we can solve getting rid of the plastic wrap from the red bins and put them in the recycling bin.
So you got any magical solutions?
We are working on that, and we'll make some proposals to you.
The other thing, Stavros, in your analysis of what's going to landfill, what I'm finding is that the red bins are full of rubbish that isn't recycled, that are in these big black bags. Is that happening at the landfill? Or are they, by the time they get up there, are they split?
It's a mixture. There are some people who do, and it's not universal. But the unfortunate thing is that with a little bit more effort, people can take a lot more out of their waste, bins, and put in the recyclables, and it's not happening yet,
It'll be a time thing. Thank you very much. Any other questions? I'd like to adjourn the meeting for lunch. We'll come back at 20 to 1. Thank you.